Good evening and welcome to Tuesday Folk People, a series that delves deep into the heart of folk music, exploring the artist at its foundation.
In the outhouse, rain goes bitter patter. We are waiting forever after.
My name is Maddie Leedham, and we're going to be joined by an extraordinary artist for this session. Specialising in Faerie Folk, she describes herself as a contemporary folk musician and multi-instrumentalist, as well as a yoga teacher, bread baker, and mushroom lover. And her name, India Blue. India dons her harp, harmonium, piano, mandolin, to name a few, to sing tales of spirituality, history, folklore, nature, and the complexities of being human. With 2 album releases, Live at Small World and The Circus Came and Went, India is a regular on the Faerie Folk Festival circuit, performing at Eco, Hippie, Pagan, and Faerie festivals. As we go through this session and explore India's life and hear some of her exclusive musical performances that she's recorded specially for us at Homestage, please leave your comments and questions in the chat function. We really love to hear from you. But I think that it's now time that we welcome India Blue to our online studio. Hi, India. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you, Maddie. How are you?
I'm great. I'm loving the new spring weather, all the beautiful flowers and everything coming out. It's put me in such a good mood. And this is going to put me in an even better mood because we got some amazing music and great conversation in store today. Speaking of music, I think that we should go for our first song, get us in the groovy mood. So we've got the first one is Soldier Beetles.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about this song before we hear it?
Yeah, so this song was actually my favourite to probably write and record from the recent album release, The Circus Came and Left. It was kind of, as a lot of songs start out, a song that was written about a personal situation, as I think lots of folk songwriters often do. But I didn't have an instrument to put it to. I just kind of wrote it lyrically. And then about a year after writing it, I started messing about on the mandolin. And I was like, how didn't I think of this before? It's kind of medieval style lyrics. Mandolins are kind of, I think, medievally sounding instrument. And so they kind of merged, and Soldier Beetles was created.
I hung out especially with the tide, and the horsemen did say, oh, don't you be doing this work. You will indeed never go away. But I have made Herman his world. I make the beds in the castle where I like to go.
India, you started performing and songwriting at, if I may say, a ridiculously young age. And this was all thanks to your piano teacher, wasn't it?
Yeah. Carla Ovenden, or now Smith. And she came to give, I think, a few free introductory piano lessons at my primary school. And no one in my immediate family, my mum nor dad, were musical, so it was kind of surprising to them that I wanted to take it up. And I did some of the free lessons, and I loved it so much that I convinced them to take me to lessons afterwards with her. And our first ever lessons, when I was about 5, she got me to explore the piano and words. So we were writing songs in our first ever piano classes about fairies going up to the high end of the piano and twinkling, and then goblins as we got down to the low end. So, I mean, it's been kind of a continuous process from then.
Set the foundations, didn't it?
Yeah.
And was it the age of 4 you wrote your first song? Or 5? Was it?
Yeah, probably about 4. That wasn't with a piano. That was just a lyrical song, Puppy
Yes.
Love.
Yeah. Which has got a lovely little backstory. Could you tell us that?
Well, Puppy Love, it's hilarious that I even remember this. I think it's because it lodges in the back of your brain, one of those like foundational moments. But it was about probably my first ever sort of crush in pretty much pre-primary school. And he lived in my village, and we both had dogs. And I think one day he said, "Oh, our dogs are in love." And I wrote a song called Puppy Love, which was basically about why are our dogs in love, but we're not.
Good question. I do think also, I think the fact that you wrote that song at the age of 5, you're giving Mozart a run for his money there. I think he was 7 when he wrote his, so
He was
you're
7
even
when
better
he
than that.
wrote his.
Yeah, Twinkle
That's
Twinkle
still
Little
very
Star, I'm pretty
young.
sure. If I'm wrong, people in the comments correct me, but I'm sure that's what he did. We'll see. Um,
Amazing.
and so was that kind of like that set your foundation? And I mean, we will explore more that's kind of the themes that you've gone for in your music, the whole fairy themes. We'll go into that later on in the interview. But would you say that if you hadn't had that kind of foundation there, you wouldn't have gone into professional musicianship?
Yeah, I mean, my whole primary school experience and then going forward secondary school experience, it was all focused around songwriting, to be honest. In even in between lessons, I'd team up with schoolmates who really weren't musical and didn't want to have anything to do with it, but I convinced them to be in a band with me. And then we'd convince another member of class to be our manager. And we'd all have songbooks, which would be like our old school book. And we just write songs constantly, and practice them in the playground or perform them to our parents. And sneak off to the school music room. I think once I got way over carried away. It started off just being lunch breaks, sneaking off to the music room, which was fine. But I think one day I must have been in year 5, and the teacher was like, you really can't miss lessons to be in the music room. I found it really rude. I was like, well, this is great.
And so when did you decide to start doing it professionally, to become a professional musician?
Probably at about 14, 15. So that was in secondary school. Again, I just had a fantastic head of music, Mark Cheeseman, and he really encouraged me in performing. He kind of gave me the heads up to apply for my first ever festival, which was the Sussex Faerie Festival. So I played there literally just after I turned 15, so about a month after my 15th birthday. And it was from then that I was like, yeah, let's just do this all the time.
And you won a competition, didn't you?
Mm.
Let me find it. Was it the Equator music competition?
Yeah, so that was probably a few months before the Fairy Festival. And that was, again, a competition that my head of music had kind of given me the heads up for. It was happening locally. And they had an under 14s or an under 15s category and then an over. And I won the younger category. And so that was with, Equator Women of the World. And
Yeah.
we've done some gigs together since, but that was, again, probably a foundational moment in performing live my own
Yeah,
stuff.
I think all of this just shows how important it is to support young people in their music, because obviously if you hadn't had it, then you might not be exactly where you are today. But all of these music teachers and people who ran the organisations like Equator Music and stuff, they're the ones who got you on this path. So it is really important.
And I
Amazing.
think people don't realize how important it can be and how nourishing even stepping into that role. I think music teachers often, what's the word, like underappreciate what they're actually giving to so many people. So this
Yeah.
is just a big thank you to all of them.
Yeah. To all you out there. You describe your sound as fairy folk, which is the first time I've ever come across that kind of subgenre within folk. Can you explain what fairy folk is?
Yeah, so fairy folk to me is an idea of channeling the sound of the fairy through folk music. Some people would say, it's kind of exploring themes of fairies and the mystical, the elemental, the other beings, in which some songs I do, but I think it's important to actually realize that all our stories about fairies in so many cultures talk about fairies being very musical and loving to play music to others. They want to celebrate and sing and dance. And I feel that through my music, I developed a closer relationship to fairies, and from a lot of people listening, that's somewhere that they go. They either think about fairies, they feel like they're somewhere else. And yeah, sorry, long ramble short, it's kind of a kind of using song to transport you to a different realm.
Would you say that there's links to paganism in that?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So again, like some fairy folk musicians, because there are a few, would probably more subgenre themselves in pagan folk, which again it can be any kind of folk sound. There's folk rock, more singer-songwriter style, um, but often exploring themes around paganism. And that's because fairies have been most openly talked about through pagan culture. They haven't been sort of like criminalized in a mental sense as devious spirits. They are semi-devious, but they've been celebrated in pagan cultures. So they appear a lot more through these scenes.
Yeah. And is there like so traditional folk songs, do they often discuss fairies and stuff like that? Or does it tend to be kind of modern songs?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, like traditional folk songs, you could easily call fairy folk if you wanted to. I mean,
Yeah.
you think about like King of the Fairies, that kind of old Irish jig that's common probably in every single folk night. Any trad folk musician knows how to play King of the Fairies. And there's different ideas about where that song came from. Some say it was delivered by the King of the Fairies himself. Things like Tam Lin, which is a traditional folk song that's been, kind of, I don't know the word, like transposed or interpreted by so many musicians, that's about a fairy.
Yeah.
And so I think it's because a lot of our old ways around the British Isles, Albion in the old world, or Albion, the land of the elves.
Ooh.
Yeah, so a lot of these old songs talked about fairies because they were they were believed in our culture, especially, I mean, around like Ireland and Scotland, lesser so in England, but they
Yeah.
were very much believed in our cultures and therefore our music.
I think it's absolutely fascinating. I'm actually really glad that we've got you here because I've never really like you hear people mention fairies and stuff like you said in Tamlin and all that kind of
Mm,
thing, but you never really you just think it could be a passing reference. You
yeah.
don't really look closer, and obviously there's a very rich thing there that needs to be tapped into, and I'm glad that we're exploring that here today.
Well, people used to, I think actually it's disappeared a little bit from our music with the influx of science,
Yeah.
because traditionally, in these rural villages, people would use fairies as an explanation for things that they couldn't really explain, milk going sour. Children coming out with disabilities even was often blamed on fairies. And so now we have science and we can explain the happenings of the world. Um, we don't need a reason to explain the unexplainable. But I believe fairies are totally still there, whether or not they're causing mischief with cattle or not.
Wow, exactly. And you play the harp, which we're going
Mm.
to see in the song that we've got coming up in a minute. Is that quite an important feature in your fairy folk?
Yeah, I totally believe so. I mean, I started playing the piano as we talked about earlier, and that's my primary instrument. Um, but the piano, I feel, isn't so closely related to fairies. The harp, however, has been used to tell folk stories of fairies for so long because it is, a traditional Celtic instrument.
Yeah.
And I feel like my relationship to fairy music has grown stronger through playing the harp. Because of that kind of mystical sound quality that
Yeah.
comes from the vibration of the strings is just something that links us all to that feeling of the ethereal and the magical.
100%. And not to mention how practical the harp is compared to the piano. Imagine lugging that piano around
You say
non-stop.
that, but for our next clip, I'm going to lug the harp in just to show you how awkward it is.
Oh, amazing. And just on the topic of the harp that you've got, wasn't that some sort of bargain that you got, that some kind of steel thing going on?
Yeah, that's another fairy story. I believe I got the harp from a fairy, to be honest. It's in Hastings, where I live now. I didn't live there at the time, but I was visiting with a friend, and I just played those first gigs, so I was late 15, almost 16. And I had been listening prolifically to Joanna Newsom. And I just walked into this shop that was kind of selling, like, thumb walking instruments and rain
Oh, yeah.
sticks and, your kind of typical, like, hippie accessory instrument shop. And I just said to my friend, I really, really want to learn the harp. And this guy just pipes up and goes, I'm selling a harp. And yeah, and at the time, I think I had a little bit of savings from all my birthdays and my pocket money. And I asked him how much he wanted for it. And he said 300 quid, which at the time sounded like a lot for me,
Yeah.
being 15, having no money. And now I look back and think, oh my God, that was the biggest steal I've ever got in my life. So the next week I came to his table and plonked a carrier bag down full of notes, coins, pennies, and said, that's almost £300. Not quite. Can I have the harp?
Oh
And
my
it's mine.
gosh. And it's like it's a really good harp, isn't it? You've
Yeah,
since found out. Yeah.
it's beautiful. I mean, they don't make them anymore. It's an old Morley harp, so that's an English harp maker. They do make beautiful harps still. But this style of harp is a blade harp. So where you tighten the string to make a sharp. It's a blade, so you have to manually turn it. Nowadays, we have lever harps, so you kind of
Yeah.
just flick up and flick down, which is a lot easier and definitely holds the sharp a bit better. This harp's, I think, my harp teacher said, from the 1940s. So
Wow.
sometimes I'm playing and the blade gets gradually less tight until it pings off, which is quite awkward, but it's all a quirk,
Change key halfway through. It's
Yeah,
cool. Amazing. Well, should we go for your next song now and actually see the harp in action? So our next song that we've got is The Envy, The Small Things. Can you tell us about this before we hear it?
Yeah, this one I actually wrote. I lived. I'm not going to name drop, but I lived with a girl when I was studying songwriting in Brighton, and it was just us living together. And since our year in Brighton, she's become quite mega famous. And I'm not going to name drop because it will be really awkward. But
You can.
but I was really jealous for a period of a month. When you live with someone and you both are in the same boat and someone's kind of
Yeah.
made it, so to speak, and you go, why haven't I? And then I did just some personal reflection and realized, actually, I really don't. I'm really pleased she's exactly where her dream wanted to be, and actually I'm where my dream wanted to be. I didn't dream about being where she is. So it was just that reflection of, okay, actually I wouldn't trade where I am now, even though that initial feeling of jealousy made me believe so.
I felt the bottom and that's how I imagine the top to feel empty. the awaited fullness feels heavy. For if I cast away all the small things that I chased, would they come back? Somewhere in my side split, I find opposites presenting perfect life to me. Parting the Red Sea, all I ask is in the direction I tread. Will you follow me? For if I cast away all the small things that I chase, would they come back? For if I cast away all the small things in exchange for some less of me, what do you think less of me? For if I did the exchange, all the small things for the stage, there'd be less of me.
Tuesday Folk People is going on tour. We're heading to Manchester, Leamington Spa and London on the 23rd, 24th and 25th of June. We're bringing to you 5 of our previous Tuesday Folk People artists to perform live. Tickets are on sale now, so head on over to our website at home-stage.co.uk to get yours. What is the Faerie Festival?
Yeah, so we kind of touched on it briefly earlier. There's probably two types of fairy festivals. Your first being a pagan fairy festival. They're often pagan festivals with a sort of fairy undertone, and we kind of explored why that probably is about paganism and their connection to fairies. And then the second, I'd probably more say, is like a fantasy fairy festival, in which they're often, although both of them are family friendly, the fantasy ones are often a little bit more family friendly or aimed a little closer at children, just being an inclusive space where they can come and explore their imagination, but therefore also adults, because this world, exploring our imagination and the magical, is often forgot about as we come into adulthood. So yeah, they're two they're magical festivals where everyone dresses up as fairies. Music's often themed around fairies. Stalls are themed around fairies. It's pretty fun.
I had a look on Google, the trusty Google, and I couldn't see anything really for Northern Fairy festivals. I think you mentioned to me previously that you don't know of that many. Have I got that right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't travelled so far up north, but I feel like I'm kind of pretty in the fairy scene. And most of the fairy festivals I know in the UK are all down south. I mean, in America, it's totally different. They're all over, but they call them Ren fairs, Renaissance festivals usually. And in the UK, I mean, we briefly touched on it. We were like asking, why is this? Why are they mainly down south? And, just an idea would be that, the South historically has had more wealth, and with wealth comes time to explore your beliefs, whether that be religious, spiritual, I don't know the word, extracurricular, like hobbies, I guess. Where people had to work a lot harder up north and maybe didn't have as much time historically to explore these things, these festivals have popped up in areas that are more concentrated with people that did historically have this more time. Not to say that that's accurate now, because we live in very different times, and the people that come to fairy festivals are from everywhere, whether they work 7 days a week or don't work at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anyone in the comments wants to correct us and say that there are actually a million fairy festivals up north and our hypothesis is wrong, please do speak up.
And
but I do
please
think that it is
invite
really
me.
interesting. Yeah, exactly.
I'd
Yeah,
love
let
to
us
come.
know. Yeah, but it is interesting, that idea, if what we say is right, that it is more in the south, and that kind of, you had the time and the resources to explore that. Because also I personally, from my own experience, do find that the south is quite a bit more open a lot of the time. I mean, living in Brighton, it's a very, very open city.
Yeah.
And like coming from a small village, but then again, that could raise the debate of small village versus big city. But please do get in the comments and kind of give your opinion on this, about the openness of the south and the north, whether you don't think there is any difference, or whether you think that there's a huge difference, and why. But it's all really interesting.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to come to a fairy festival. I think they
Please
sound
do.
so cool.
We've got
Do you
one
get to
coming
dress up as fairies?
Oh yeah, we all adorn our long ears, or should I say, for any of my younger viewers, we grow our ears. Your ears grow when you're around other fairies. Sometimes your wings grow depending on the weather. If it's raining, often fairies don't like to grow their wings. Yeah, everyone dresses up. It's fantastic.
Sounds amazing. A huge part of your life is yoga, and I kind of want to see, that's like your profession, isn't it?
Well, I guess my profession's a mix of everything. I try and keep loving what I love. And my dad said when I was younger, he said, do what you love, but also if you put all of your emphasis on making what you love make money, you'll probably stop loving it. So I really early on at 18 decided I wasn't going to be employed by anyone else anymore, and decided to go self-employed as soon as I turned 18. And through that, it's a mixture of everything, a mixture of music, gigging, selling CDs, but yoga a lot. I'm teaching lots of yoga classes at the minute and feeling really blessed to do so.
Yeah. And does your yoga interlink with your music, or are they quite separate activities in your life?
Yeah, yoga definitely interlinks. Yoga and music can be the same thing. I mean, when you come to Bhakti yoga, which is a form of yoga, and that's devotional yoga, often that is just singing, singing devotional songs. And within my music, I often explore things that maybe arise in my personal practice after I finished a yoga practice on the mat. Questions, one song on the album, We're Free. I think I might be playing that one.
We've got that, yes.
We've got that
one.
one song, We're Free.
It's actually our next song, so everyone will hear that coming up. Yeah.
Well, I'm skipping a question then, because We're Free was directly influenced by my yoga. My partner and I were singing a lot of mantras together, and that's why the harmonium came into my life. And I wanted to write a song that felt like it truly came from my heart. I find a lot of sort of yoga music is semi-cliche, just like a lot of fairy music, and I'm really just not into cliches. I'm into people's truths, whatever that is, whether it's messy, murky, muddy. We're all human. None of us are perfect, shiny beings. And I wanted to write a sort of mantra-esque song that promoted a message. So We're Free was the message, and it was about releasing that idea of being human and our ego and the stories that come around that, what I look like, what I do. When someone asks you, what do you do? And you have to explain, who are you? And I was just trying to get rid of that and remind us all that we are this spirit soul having a human experience.
Yeah. And do you ever, like, actually when you're doing the yoga practice itself, like the poses and stuff, do you ever sing while you're doing that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I wouldn't sing any old song. It's usually usually mantras, songs that would enhance my practice. Because, you know, when you're doing a yoga practice, you want all of your drishti, your focus or your attention to be in your practice and what you're focusing on. So if I was just singing, you know, a pop song, my attention would be somewhere else rather than on my practice. But if I'm singing a mantra or an affirmation, whether that be we're free, Om, which is the primordial sound, which a lot of people, you know, think about when they hear yoga, they think of Om. But these are all forms of singing, letting your voice flow out and letting that sound emphasize your practice and your experience.
That's my goal, to get to a point where I can do that easily. At the moment, every time I practice yoga, just a grunt comes out. So I just need to get a little bit stronger, a little bit more flexible.
Maybe that emphasis on your exhale whilst you're grunting to make it a bit like you can have that grunt and that deep like grr. But yeah, when you send your focus there, maybe that's the noise that just wants to come out. A deep, soulful grunt. That's your song.
Well, it sounds fantastic. And like I never even thought about, because I know that yoga it's so good for your physical body, but it's also so good for your mind and the meditative side to it. But I hadn't thought about how that could link to music. And do you ever, like, when you want to songwrite, do you do some bit of yoga just to get the juices flowing and stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, I try and practice yoga every day in some. Well, I do practice yoga every day in some form, whether that be a physical practice, like you were saying, you know, the postures, the asana on the mat, or another form of yoga, just yogic philosophy off of the mat, and that is constantly affecting the songwriting. And you know, I've written songs with other people before, and it's really important. Or even when I was recording the album, my producer, he practices a lot of yoga. His partner's also a yoga teacher. And so before we recorded most of the songs, you know, we'd do some yoga together or take big, deep, mindful breaths and send our attention to, you know, the present or our intention for that song. And that really helped the whole process of recording.
I'm tired of getting what I want, tired of getting what I need. I got a bit less of control and I'm free. I'm tired of being who I want, tired of being who I need. I'm being much less self-aware and I'm free. I'm free. I'm free. I'm free. I'm free. You're tired of getting what you want, tired of getting what you need. You've got to be less of control and you're free. You're tired of being who you want, tired of being who you need. You're being much less self-aware and you're free. You're free. You're free. You're free. You're free. You're free. We're tired of getting what we want, tired of getting what we need. We've got a bit less of control and we're free. We're tired of being who we want, tired of being who we need. We're being much less self-aware and we're free. We're free. We're free. We're
Your first album was an album called Live at Small World. Can you tell us about this album?
Yeah, so this came as sort of a surprise. I was doing a gig at Small World, the festival, which is a beautiful little hippie festival in Kent. And I think it was in 2015 or 16 or 7, I can't quite remember the year, but it was the first festival I'd ever performed with my harp. And my good friend at the time, B. Everett, who's also a fantastic, fantastic musician, based in Brighton, actually. And she had told the sound desk to please record the whole set, and I didn't realize it was happening. And so at the end, she said, well, actually, she didn't tell me right at the end. She mixed it first and then kind of went, here is your CD. Please sell these at your gigs, because I had nothing to give out or sell. I was doing gigs for free because that's what young musicians do. And, spending money to do the gig, to be honest, because I wasn't getting anything back. So she said, now you've got something to earn your travel or a little bit of cash after. And so I'm very grateful to her for that. And that was, the first album. They were all hand burned on my brother's laptop that still had a CD port, and hand stamped with a kind of lino cutout. So they're very rough and ready, but quite lovely.
Yeah. And then you then went on to have your first studio album, which is The Circus Came and Left.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this album is very different from the first one.
Yeah.
Obviously, first things first, it's in a studio. But what could people expect if they were to listen to the album?
Yes, so that one I feel is way more representative of my sound now. Compared to Live at Small World, I was still discovering my sound and where I sit, and also my kind of delivery. So Live at Small World's very festival-y. I'm giggling through most of the tracks. It's like you're there and you're a bit confused and you've had 3 days at a festival and not very much sleep. Whereas whereas The Circus Came and Left is the songs in their form and me trying to deliver them as best as I can. So I worked with my producer Tom Clarkson to shape these songs in a simple yet meaningful way. We didn't have loads of funds to record the album. It was partially crowdfunded and partially self-funded. And so we didn't have loads to plow into it, but we were lucky enough to hire some really fantastic musicians to contribute to some of the tracks. So it's quite simple, but meaningful.
What kind of themes and stuff do you explore in it?
So lots of themes, again, like we were talking about, themes that come up through yoga, self-inquiry. We'll think about, why are we here? What are we doing? Those big questions. But also, a lot of things. Actually, the first song, Magpie, on the album was a thought about past lives that I feel I can remember. So every different verse in that was another life that I feel I can remember living. And then, zoom to the end of the album. The Circus Came and Left is a song about loss and grief. So it's almost like that. There's two songs there that are about loss and the past, and then the bit in the middle is the life happening. It's kind of like a story
Wow.
of living.
So it's a proper journey there, like the
Mm,
journey of life through the album.
mm.
Amazing.
And that's why I
Gosh,
think, yeah, sorry.
that's okay.
I think that's why I wanted to make an album straight away. People said, you're not doing it right. You've got to release singles and an EP and build a massive fan base. And I was like, why? I want to make an album because I want people to go on this journey and listen to it, whether they've got a CD player or whether they're just listening on a streaming service. I really want people to listen from start to finish and hear the songs kind of bleed into each other, and what one song leaves, the other song might give back, or
Exactly, yeah. And so if people wanted to listen to them, are they both available online?
Yeah. So they're both available online you can get physical copies on Bandcamp, or you can listen. Live at Small World isn't available on streaming services other than Bandcamp and YouTube. And that's just because there's a few covers in there, and they're a little bit tricky to get on Spotify.
Mhm.
So
This is the part of the interview where I talk about things we've got going on in the future. And there's one thing that you mentioned to me before that I found fascinating. And that's like a potential future collaboration with your
oh,
great grandma
yeah.
and yourself.
Yeah, my great grandma Nancy Terry. I only met her a few times when I was very young, and she had dementia. So I don't really remember her as a living being, but my family obviously can. And for the longest time, they've said that I'm almost like a copy paste of Nancy, in the way that she was probably one of the only really musical females in the family. I've got a very musical, talented uncle, but she played the piano and she sang songs on her piano, and she wrote songs and wrote poetry. And quite a few years after she died, I was probably in my very early teens. A member of my family, I can't remember if it was my granddad or my dad, gave me this little red book, and it was poems by Nancy Terry, and it was her like notebook. And she used to go up to Scotland once a year for about a month, walking and writing poems. And when I opened this book, at the time I was going through quite a hard time in my teens, and I opened this notebook, and it was like peering into my brain what she'd written. There was one bit and it said, I cannot walk on your road, I cannot walk by your side. And later on, I found out that that was almost, I think it's a passage that's taken from, I don't know what the book is in for Jehovah Witnesses, but she was a Jehovah Witness in her later life, and it came from her religion and her spirituality. So I'm trying to transpose some of her poems into song and kind of
That would be
bring
amazing.
her words into existence through that.
And it'll be really feed into that intergenerational aspect of folk music there, won't it? Like just
Yeah.
you're making music with your great grandma, and that's just incredible. And so will that be an album, do you think?
It will be part of an album. I'm working on collecting songs now for the next album, and it's going to be a little bit more traditional inspired. So adapting some old folk songs, adapting other poems, and of course adapting my great grandma's poem.
I look forward to that.
Thank
And so
you.
if people want to find out about that, do you have a website and stuff that people can get that
Yes.
information from?
Yeah, I've got a website. It's just India Blue Music. And I've got a mailing list on that website. All the information's there, or on my social platforms, and I'll be posting about it in the near future.
Hey! And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find India's website linked in the description below. So check that out. And do you have anything else going on in the future?
Yeah, well, very near future. What day is it today? The 20th of April. So in 9 days, I've actually got a release coming out, with Spirit House Records. And we're just releasing a little kind of B-side single. So it was just recorded at my home. And the first song, the single's called Power. And then there's a kind of B-side cover of a song called Love is a funny thing. Love is a very funny thing. Love is a Funny Thing by Spyro Gyra, who were a folk band from the 70s, who also classed themselves as fairy folk. So
Ah,
yeah, that's going to be coming out in 9
also
days. But when this is uploaded,
amazing.
maybe
It'll
it
be
will
out already.
already
Yes.
be out.
So go and check it out now. Why
Yeah,
not? It's
go
there.
and have a look.
Excellent. Well, brilliant.
Yeah.
Sadly, we have run out of time for this interview. So before we go for our last song, I do want to just say a huge thank you for joining us. It's been really enlightening. I love to explore new subgenres and stuff that I don't know about. And so I've really got that from
Thank you
today.
so much for having me, Maddie. Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you. And so we've got our final song, which is Cinnamon.
When I wrote it, which it will be probably quite evident once you hear it, it was about kind of questioning yourself again, wanting to stand up for yourself a bit more in situations. But the funny story was when I'd finished writing this and was like, yeah, I'm going to record this and release it, Lana Del Rey, who I also very much love, released a song called Cinnamon, and I was like, maybe I can't anymore.
In the outhouse, rain goes bitter patter. We are waiting forever after. On the blackboard, meet me at the station. I'm at platform 7, waiting for the wind to change. Hold his neck up, lifeless like a turkey, limp and feeling breathless, pressed upon the coffee stand. Didn't I say I'd stay home tonight? Didn't I say I'd stay home tonight? Home tonight, home tonight. But I cannot win. My spine made of cinnamon. In my life, how can I grow this garden? I've been making weed into medicine. Didn't I say I would dig them out? Didn't I say I would dig them out? Dig them out. Dig them out. But I cannot win. My spine made of cinnamon. But I cannot win. My spine made of cinnamon. In the city, I am like a bocce, got to be in narrow. There's always a price to pay. Didn't I say I would stay away? Didn't I say I would stay away? Stay away, stay away. But I cannot win. My spine made of cinnamon. But I cannot win. My spine made of cinnamon. But I cannot win. My spine made of cinnamon.
Thank thank you for watching. Our next session will be 2 weeks from today at 8 p.m. For more information about our future Tuesday Folk People sessions, podcasts, and other events, please sign up to our mailing list or keep an eye on our social media and website.
As I was going to Derby, was on the market day.